Hello everybody. So I get asked to do lore videos all the time, and I always think, but I've written it all. Why do you need a lore video? So I'm going to read some of my writing, but I'm going to make it a little more interesting than that, in that I'm going to take periodic breaks anytime I do these lore videos and I'm just reading, to give some insight, some backstory, things I might have left out or because I didn't have room. And in some cases, like this video, I'm going to give some new lore at the end that will eventually end up on the lore site. But for now, you get a sneak peek. And so today we're going to talk about Loeck. And so I'm going to be reading from the Loeck chapter in Western Iron. And then again at the end, I'm going to give you some more fluff to catch you up to what's currently going on, which we need to set up for future books that are coming out. Campryg Loeck, Crusader Marshal in the West. Campryg Loeck, 1735 to the present. Loeck began his career as an idealistic rifler in the 72nd Craich Line Regiment, where his dogged perseverance and abilities as a soldier led to his rapid promotion up the ranks. So this is important. Loeck starts as a true believer. He's not cynical or calculating yet. He genuinely thinks the crusade can end the long war and free Quar from the First Families. Keep that in mind, because watching that idealism get tested, broken, and then rebuilt into something different, and eventually compromised, is really Loeck's entire arc. By 1781, he'll make choices that would horrify the young rifler that had volunteered for the 72nd Craich Regiment. But that is his path. He was inducted into the elite 62nd Guards after volunteering to lead a successful trench raid. When the 62nd Guards were reorganized after the disastrous Battle of Two Peaks, where he again performed bravely, Loeck was granted an officer's commission in the 100th Guards as an Is-Cairn. Leading an advance in the Belgaran Woods, western Arnyaran, in early 1772, Loeck was seriously wounded by small arms fire. For his actions there, he was awarded the Medal of Valor. After nearly 3 months in a field hospital, Loeck was invalided out of the army and returned home to County Craich in Leitrim. So here's Loeck at his lowest point. Multiple wounds, his career over, he's back home in County Craich. He's done his part, bled for the crusade, and it's someone else's problem now. But notice what happens next. He doesn't stay retired. Something pulls him back in, and that something is Garenhar's essays. He's written about the state of the crusade, its stalemate in Coftier, the plight of the common Quar. And so that idealist in Loeck, it isn't dead, it's just waiting for the right spark. Hars's writings reignite that revolutionary fire, and he re-enters service in 1774. This time, though, he's not just a soldier, he's a soldier with ideas about how things should be run. At the time of his mustering out, Campryg Loeck had earned the Guards Badge with crossed palm, the Medal of Valor, 4 signets of bravery, the Red Tier twice for wounds sustained, and campaign medals for the Heights, Erdic Valley, and the Arnyaran fronts. In the early 1770s, he encountered the writings of Garen Harris. Those writings, most notably the essays written by Harris concerning the state of the crusade and its stalemate with Coftier, reignited the idealistic side of Loeck. He re-entered service after the Crusader rout from Coftier in 1774 and began a meteoric rise to the officer ranks. The Crow's God Weir was in desperate need of experienced officers, and retired Campryg Loeck, when he arrived at the enlistment depot dressed in civilian clothes with his Red Tier medals tacked to his lapels, was immediately re-enlisted and granted the rank of Colonel and sent directly to General HQ West. When he arrived at GHQ West in Slovak Mare-Brach, Colonel Loeck found himself repeatedly without an assignment. The most obvious postings were to combat commands, but after the Crusader retreat into Mare-Brach, the army's organization was in shambles. For a week, Loeck commanded the 131st Hussars, which was down to 32 effectives out of nearly 500. Then, briefly, he commanded the 44th Guards Brigade before those understrength units were absorbed by others within their division. Loeck took it upon himself to attend staff meetings. GHQ West was still in such disarray that no one thought to question his presence until one afternoon, Campryg Loeck noticed the colonel standing confidently among the higher-ranking officers. Loeck is reported to have asked who the bloody kit with all the clinkers on his chest was. When Loeck identified himself, after a brief pause, Loeck snapped to attention and saluted the hero. At the time of Loeck's awarding of the Medal of Valor, Loeck had been the Caneral commanding the 12th Guards Division, of which Loeck's 100th Guards Regiment was assigned. Loeck had personally signed Loeck's medal award paperwork, but the two had never met in person. That next evening, the Campryg invited Loeck to his residence. The two spent the evening discussing Coftir, the Crusade, and the terrible state of affairs the Western Theater had fallen into. The next afternoon, Loeck was promoted to Caneral and added to the GHQ West staff as a strategic advisor to the Campryg. And this is where we see that Loeck's real genius isn't battlefield tactics. It's understanding systems and power. He's stuck in limbo with no assignment. So what does he do? He just starts attending staff meetings. Nobody stops him, and when Campryg Loeck notices this journal with all those medals, the war hero snaps to attention and introduces himself. Loeck understands that sometimes you don't wait for permission. You just act like you belong and see who challenges you. It's a pattern you'll see throughout his career. Identify the power vacuum, fill it before anyone realizes what you're doing. Fake it till you make it. Actually, smarter than that. General Loeck spent most of late 1774 planning the numerous reported breakouts of Crusader units still stranded in Coftir. Loeck was on the ground for 2 of those operations and was wounded for the 3rd time in his career. While recuperating from his wounds, Loeck learned that Campryg Loeck had been replaced and recalled to talk over the continuing disaster in Coftir, a disaster widely known to have been command's negligence rather than Loeck's. In the first month of 1775, Campryg belgaran replaced Loeck, and among the Campryg's first action was to relocate GHQ West to Creven. In Verda, one of the richest cities in the West, was well known for its social circles, grand balls, and as a culture holding on to the last vestiges of the lifestyle of the first families. Belgaran was a former royal from Schramm who had pledged allegiance to the Crusade when Schramm fell. Loeck and Belgaran were often at odds over Loeck's desire to continue planning defensive and offensive measures along the Coftiran border. Okay, so Loeck gets recalled to talk over the Coftir disaster, and his replacement is Campryg Belgaran, a former Schramm royal who pledged to the Crusade when his kingdom fell. And immediately, you can see that the clash is coming. Belgaran moves the GHQ to Verda, one of the richest cities in the West, famous for grand balls and society. Basically, the last gasp of the first family lifestyle. He's a creature of the old world, trying to command a revolutionary army. Loeck, the actual revolutionary, is not going to respect that. Belgaran once called Loeck a puffed-up war hero, in front of the entire planning staff, and from there, their relationship deteriorated further. Belgaran forced Loeck to relocate to Verda to keep him away from the front lines. When Loeck continued to divert resources and cause trouble along the border, Belgaran relieved Loeck of his staff and planning duties and reassigned Loeck as the Caneral of the Rifler Corps. This position was traditionally a figurehead, nominally in charge of the well-being and morale of the Crow's Guide Warriors Riflers. The Campryg could not court-martial Loeck, as he had, in a short time, again become a hero and symbol of the army. Throughout the rest of 1775 and 1776, Loeck turned his new posting into a relevant and integral part of the army's command structure. And so the tension explodes. Loeck keeps pushing for operations along the Coftiran border, keeps diverting resources to the front lines, and he won't play the political games. Belgaran calls him a puffed-up war hero in front of the entire planning staff and reassigns him as Caneral of the Rifle Corps. This is meant to be a punishment. The Rifle Corps is traditionally a ceremonial position, a figurehead for morale. Belgaran thinks he's sidelining Loeck. But here's the thing about Loeck. Give him any position with even a thread of authority, and he'll turn it into real power. The Rifle Corps technically oversees personnel, training, supplies, postal service, morale, all the unglamorous logistics. The thing that actually wins wars. Belgaran wanted him out of the strategic planning. Instead, Loeck just built a parallel command structure that would eventually prove more important than GHQ itself. While the position had always been symbolic, no lower-level officer or supply clerk, nor quite often his peers, would refuse Loeck's orders. Loeck rebuilt the personnel department system for unit assignments and new recruits, revised the drill and combat training courses, updated the postal delivery system to deploy units, and employed several Arnyaran traveling entertainment clans to create a permanent rotation throughout Creven, Eastgate, and Merbrecht to entertain the Crusade bases dotting the countryside. By late 1776, Loeck had a staff of nearly 300, and controlled all of the non-combat related supply in the west for the Crow's God Weir. Okay, let's look at what Loeck's doing here. He's not planning battles and moving armies. He's making sure letters get delivered every fifth. He's updating training courses. He's bringing in Arnyaran theater troops to entertain the riflers. He's fixing the personnel system so riflers actually get assigned where they're needed. This seems small, but it's absolutely crucial. Loeck understands that wars aren't just won with rifles and tractors. They're won by keeping your soldiers connected to home, properly trained and fed, and believing in what they're fighting for. Every rifler who gets a letter on time, every new recruit who gets better training, every squad that gets assigned to the right position, they're all going to remember who made that happen. Not belgaran, sitting at in Vevenverda at social functions, Loeck. By late 1776, Loeck has a staff of nearly 300 and controls all non-combat supply in the West. He's built an empire from a ceremonial title. The nature of the relationship between Loeck and the Dowager Maven of Creven has not yet become clear to history. There is some speculation and rumor, much of it contradictory. It is generally held by most historians that the relationship between Loeck and the Dowager was close and most likely romantic. It is known that the two met sometime in late 1775 or early 1776. The young Dowager was often seen in the air yards, and it is assumed the two met there upon Loeck's return from one of his many trips south to visit the troops. Soon after, the two were seen at many society gatherings and balls in the Crevish capital. And this is when Loeck meets the Dowager Maven. The historical record is deliberately vague about the relationship, but here's what we know. They met sometime in late 1775 or early 1776, probably at the air yards and in Vevenverda. She was often seen visiting the troops. They were soon spotted together at society gatherings and balls in the Crevish capital. Most historians believe that the relationship was romantic. But here's what's crucial to understand. This isn't just a love story. Whether or not they were lovers matters less than what they represent to each other. Loeck is a crusader revolutionary trying to end the First Family's power and reshape Quar society. Maven is a young dowager of a defeated kingdom trying to hold Creven together after its surrender, surrounded by nobles who blame her for the loss and question her legitimacy. They're both outsiders, too radical for the conservatives, too pragmatic for the purists. And they understand each other in a way nobody else can. Remember this relationship. It's going to shape everything that happens in 1781. In 1777, rumors of Alakinder's failing health began to circulate. In Talk, Christ, Kreisel, and Schramm, the fallout was nearly immediate. Eastern half of the continent had been in turmoil for decades, and those tensions, even on rumor, began to ignite old rivalries. Talk, the home of the crusade, nearly splintered in two in the first weeks of speculation and rumor. Amidst the turmoil in Talk, Campryg belgaran was recalled to Crusader HQ. With little ceremony, belgaran left Creven with the entirety of the Crusader air mobile forces in the west and their specialized air fleet. Except for a few telegrams, belgaran had no further communications with GHQ West. Loeck welcomed the autonomy he now had. The Campryg had left his chief of staff, Cainril Crady, in charge, but Crady was primarily a political creature rather than a military leader. Within a month of belgaran's absence, Loeck was effectively running the entirety of GHQ West behind the scenes. There was very little pushback from any of the general staff or combat commands. Almost all supported this move openly. 1777 brings rumors of Alakinder's failing health. Campryg belgaran is recalled to Talk, and he takes with him the entire air mobile forces, leaving Cainril Crady, a political creature, not a military leader, nominally in charge. However, within a month, Loeck is effectively running the entire Western theater. Not because anyone promoted him, but because there's a power vacuum, and Loeck is the only one capable of filling it. Communication with Talk becomes spotty at best, and Loeck starts experiencing real autonomy. But he can't make it official. He needs political backing for that. Substantive communication with the primary Crusader HQ and Talk was spotty at the best of times, and Loeck began to experience a fair degree of autonomy directing Crusader affairs in the West. However, no orders from General HQ came through to promote Loeck to Campryg, and so Loeck was powerless to make many larger changes and decisions he deemed appropriate. Piecing together comments from speeches, writings, and accounts from members of their staffs, it is believed that Loeck and Maven worked together to devise a plan for Loeck to claim the title of Campryg. Loeck would have required the support of the Dowager, as well as Governor Lebil of Iski, and the Talon Marin generals of Merbrach. Former Merbrach Governor Harris would have been involved as well. This is where it gets really interesting. Loeck can't just declare himself Campryg. He needs a coalition. So he works with Maven, with Governor Lebil of Iski, with the Talon Marin commanders of Merbrach, and with the Garin Hars, who comes out of retirement to serve as Merbrach's governor. So look at who's involved in this. The Dowager of a supposedly conquered nation, the governor of what's technically still a Crusader subject state, the old National Guard of Merbrach, and Hars, the essayist, whose writings inspired Loeck's return to service. This isn't the Crusade anymore, this is something new being born. On the 34th of Cainilid, 1779, with no official orders from Crusader HQ, Cainarel Loeck named himself Campryg and officially assumed command of all Crusader forces west of Lake Morandi. In the end, it amounted to a bloodless coup. The army had suffered under belgaran, and there were no illusions among the troops about the fragile state of Alwyd and the near civil war in Talk. The common rifler and the citizens loyal to the Crusade felt alone and cut off. Campryg Loeck gave them hope. In the end, Talk agreed to the promotion. The west was a drain on resources, and several hundred miles of land or an enemy-filled lake separated the two halves of the Crusade. The situation in the east was such that not many noticed the military and political fracture. On the 34th of Cainilid, 1779, Loeck names himself Campryg. It's a bloodless coup, and here's the remarkable thing. It works. The army supports him because they have been suffering under belgaran's incompetence and neglect, and Loeck has spent years actually caring about them, making sure they get their mail, get trained properly, and get assigned where they're needed. Talk agrees to it because the West is a resource drain anyway, separated by hundreds of miles of enemy-controlled territory, and they're too busy with their own crisis to object. It's a gamble that only works because Loeck has spent 4 years building the infrastructure, logistical, political, and personal, to make it work. He didn't seize power with violence. He built the foundation so thoroughly that when he finally claimed the title, everyone just accepted it. Always a skilled orator when it came to boosting morale and motivating the troops, Loeck needed to turn his skills to motivating the populace for many of his reforms. Hars came out of retirement to once again serve as Merbrach's governor. Loeck relied on Hars as his right-hand Quar in all political matters. It was Hars that titled his and Loeck's political plans as the Union of Free Nations. Rather than a central, political, and military authority over aligned nations, the Union would allow member nations that join willingly to govern themselves as long as rights and privileges for the citizenry were protected according to the Union's charter. Military operations against enemies of the Union could be conducted individually or jointly, but would require the support of a majority of aligned nations. Nations that joined the Union unwillingly, via military subjugation or political overthrow, would have new governments installed by the Union, with a preference to looking internally to the newly joining country before appointing a governing body from other Union member nations. And now, Loeck and Hars formalized their political vision, the Union of Free Nations. This is crucial to understand because it's fundamentally different from the Crusade's model. The traditional Crusade conquered nations and imposed Crusader rule from the top down. This created resentment, rebellion, and occupational costs. That's going on in the East right now. Loeck's Union says, join willingly, keep your own government as long as you protect the rights and freedoms of all Quar, and we'll defend you collectively. Military operations can be conducted individually or jointly as needed. It's revolutionary, it's democratic, it's also the opposite of how Crusader HQ and Talk operates. Loeck isn't just breaking away militarily, he's ideologically splitting from the Crusade, trying to create what he thinks Alakinder originally envisioned before it got corrupted. But here's the dark irony we'll see play out. Building this union is going to require Loeck to betray almost every principle it's supposedly built on. Governor Lebil of Iski, while an ardent crusader, had also become disenchanted with Crusader command. Iski's resources were being used to stalemate Christ's military, while Christ openly rebelled. Iski's future was quickly being drained with little hope of relief. Lebil found that a pact with Loeck, with an eye towards formalizing Loeck's union, was Iski's best path forward, but would have to be handled deftly and hidden from Crusader HQ and Talk, until it was too late for Crusader command to react. Loeck's first major initiative shocked everyone from the elite first families to the common farmer. Loeck declared the crusade would be leaving Creven to her fate, and the center of Western Crusader power would return to Slovak in Mirbrach. The shock of this announcement led to many rumors of scorned love between the Dowager and Loeck. The reality, however, was that the political and military situation in Creven had become dire. Crevish lords in the south were nearly in open rebellion, and in the west of Creven, especially in the Elmore Valley region, many small skirmishes had been fought among locals already. Maven's price for backing Loeck's self-promotion and becoming the most powerful Quar in the west was returning her country to the Crevish. The crusade was spread too thin in Creven, and any attempt to quell the rebellion there would backfire. Openly siding with the crusade against her own people, even if they were in open rebellion, would have further dwindled Maven's control. In early 1780, Loeck makes an announcement that shocks everyone. The crusade is leaving Creven. The center of Western Crusader power will return to Slovak in Mirbrach. This causes immediate panic and rumors. Everyone thinks that Loeck is abandoning Creven to its fate. Some spread stories about scorned love between Loeck and the Dowager Maven, that this is a revenge for a failed relationship. But the reality is much more calculated. The political situation in Creven is dire. Southern Crevish lords are practically in open rebellion against Maven's authority. The Elmore Valley is full of partisan activity. Loeck is stretched and possibly thin. He can't hold Creven, prepare for a planned Koftir offensive, and manage all his other commitments. So he makes a strategic withdrawal. But notice, he doesn't abandon Maven completely. This actually gives her political cover. She can tell her nobles and the southern lords, I drove out the Crusaders. I restored Crevish sovereignty. Makes her look strong and legitimate. Behind the scenes, there's an understanding forming. Loeck needs his Lake Morandi shipping corridor to make his Union of Free Nations economically viable. Maven needs someone to deal with those rebellious southern lords who don't recognize her authority. And Loeck has Iskavite allies, technically independent, not directly under Crusader command. An informal arrangement. The Iskavites will operate in southern Creven. They get their coastal trade corridor. Maven gets the southern problem handled by someone else's army. Both can claim success without admitting they coordinated. Maven also does something interesting here. She reaches out to the Fidwalg Overseas Department, asking them to come to Creven's aid. Now, most historians think this was political theater. Fidwalg is on the other side of the continent, the logistics are nightmarish. Maven probably never expected them to actually come. It was a gesture to prove her legitimacy. Look, I'm reaching out to traditional allies, not working with the Crusaders. Except, the FOD is actually going to come, and that's going to complicate everything. But there's something else happening here. Something Loeck knows is coming. He's not just withdrawing, he's making room, positioning for something. And he needs Maven to remember, when things get chaotic, that he's the one who made this arrangement possible. What's he positioning for? We're about to find out. It is generally believed that sometime in the winter of 1778 and 79, Gigor Raedaer, head of the Arnyaran Nod Fe, used the cover of a merchant caravan to meet in secret with the Campryg for the first time. While the Arnarans had been on both sides of the crusade over the years, in their heart, the Nod Fe shared the same ideals as Alakinder for how the common Quar should be allowed to lead their lives. Most historians and journalists speculated that whenever this first meeting did occur, Raedaer most likely revealed the existence and strength of the Fosgilde to Loeck, either as a warning to continue the Crusade's hands-off approach to Arnyaran, or as a gesture from Raedaer to someone he may have considered a fellow radical. There were several more secret meetings confirmed to have taken place in the summer and fall of 1779. Eventually, Loeck agreed to allow Arnyaran forces to attack into Creven proper, utilizing attack corridors through Mirbrach where needed, but to continue no further east in Creven than Aber. This would leave Invevenverda and the northern counties, though still lower to Maven, unscathed. In return, Raedaer would also open a second attack route into Koftir to draw down Koftiran forces protecting the wall along Koftiran's northern border with Mirbrach. Raedaer and Loeck agreed to a summer 1780 timeline for the Arnyaran invasion of Creven, and a New Year 1781 timeframe for the Arnyaran invasion of Koftir, to allow Loeck the year to properly marshal his forces. Remember when Loeck withdrew from Creven and we said he was positioning for something? This is what that was about. Sometime in winter 1778 or 79, before the withdrawal, Gigor Raedaer, head of the Arnyaran Nod Fe, used a merchant caravan as cover to meet Loeck in secret. This is wild for several reasons. The Arnyarans have been on both sides of the Long War. They're nobody's allies. Raedaer is at least as radical as Loeck, maybe even more so. But they share something crucial. Both believe common Quar should rule their own lives, not the first families. Raedaer reveals the full strength of the Fossil Day to Loeck, maybe as a warning, maybe as a gesture of respect between fellow radicals, and they start negotiating. And by 1779 they've made a pact. Raedaer gets to reclaim Aber from Creven, land the Arnyarans believe was lost to them generations ago. In return, he'll open a second front against Campryg from the south, drawing Camprygian forces away from the wall, and giving Loeck the opening he needs to break through for Mare Breach. Two revolutionaries coordinating invasions behind everyone's back. The timeline is set. Summer 1780 for the Arnyaran invasion of Creven to reclaim Aber, then 1781 for the Arnyaran attack on Campryg and the Crusader breakthrough of the wall. Loeck agrees that Arnyaran forces can use attack corridors through Mare Breach to reach Campryg. This is huge. He's giving a foreign power military access to Crusader territory, but he extracts a promise. Raedaer will stop at Aber's original borders. He won't push further east into Creven. He'll leave in Vev and Verda and their northern counties, the part still loyal to Maven, alone. Remember that promise, because Raedaer's also going to break it. So now the Creven withdrawal makes sense, right? Loeck withdraws in early 1780 because he already knows the Fossil Day invasion is coming in the summer. He can't stop it. Raedaer has the forces, the will, and the popular support among Western Arnyarans. Neither Loeck nor Maven controls Western Creven well enough to prevent it. So instead of fighting the inevitable, they're working with it. Loeck withdraws, gives Maven political cover, positions his Eascovite allies to handle the southern Crevish problem and secure a shipping corridor. And when Raedaer comes to reclaim Aber, they're both allowing it because they can't stop it anyway. It's cynical, but two leaders who maybe cared about each other once, now carving up Creven between them and a third party, all while pretending it's about principles and sovereignty. And it's all based on one assumption, that they can control what happens next. That Raedaer will keep his word and stop at Aber's borders. That the FOD won't actually show up. Spoiler, they can't control it. In 1781, Raedaer is going to break his promise and push past Aber into eastern Creven toward Vev and Verda. And the FOD is going to land at the Aretini and stall the Eascovite invasion. And when that happens, Loeck and Maven are going to need each other more desperately than ever. Not out of love, not even out of respect, just out of pure survival. But in 1780, they don't know that yet. In 1780, they think they're being clever. Just after the new year, the 11th of Elwith 1780, a small kite landed in Slovic with an urgent messenger for the Campryg. The kite was badly damaged, and the pilots, SBS agents, were gravely wounded. The message was that Alakinder, father of the Crusade, was dead, and with him, quite possibly, the Crusade itself. Loeck's reactions matched those of the main Crusader HQ in talk. Keep the news quiet for as long as possible. Tensions were already high, and Loeck knew that in the east the loose alliances would shatter, and here in the west they would be sorely tested. Loeck broke the news to his top staff of governor, Harris, and Labille only. On the 11th of Elwith, 1780, a badly damaged kite lands in Slovic with an urgent message. The pilots are SBS agents, Crusader intelligence, and they're gravely wounded. The message? Alakinder, father of the Crusade, is dead. Loeck knows what this means. In the east, the loose alliances holding the Crusade together are about to shatter completely. And here in the west, they're about to be tested harder than ever. He makes the same choice Crusader HQ in talk has. Keep it quiet as long as possible. He only tells Harris and Governor Labille. Because if the common rifle learns that Alakinder is dead, that the Crusade's founder and spiritual heart is gone, morale could have collapsed entirely. But Loeck also knows he can't keep it secret forever, and when the news breaks, the Western Crusade needs to be ready to stand on its own. Loeck underestimated the depth and skill of the Arnyaran spy network, and a month after Loeck received the news, he received a coded message from Raedaer via wireless. Nod Fe Ale. Using autocycles, kadir, small airships, and all other manner of conveyance, the Arnyaran spies in talk also delivered the news of Alakinder home to Western Arnyara within 5 days of his death. Raedaer's wireless message to Loeck was the agreed-upon go phrase to execute their cooperative invasion plans. However, the signal came almost a half year earlier than agreed upon. The Nod Fae had used the preceding month to maneuver their massive formations into position. The Arnyarans had long before detected most of Loeck's undercover SBS agents in their ranks and had detained them, without harm, and fed false intelligence back to their Crusader allies. With the Arnyaran attack coming early, Loeck stepped up the Crusader timetable for their own invasion of Campryg. Raedaer promised to keep to the timetable for his attack into Campryg, which was planned for 1781. Loeck's primary concern was, as always in the West, logistics and supply. Crusader units in Mirabreach relied on supply from their industrial base in Iski. The Crusaders had been working to pacify Loeck-Mauvn over the preceding years, and had made real headway. But by 1781, the ports in Iski, Creven, and Mirabreach were not yet reliable. So, with a daring plan and an untested method of warfare, Crusader units from Iski invaded eastern Creven with a massive and fast armored formation. And this is where everything starts to go wrong. The Arnyaran spy network is better than Loeck realized, much better. They get news of Alakinder's death almost as fast as Crusader intelligence does, within days. Using autocycles, Kadirs, small airships, every method available to them, they travel. Raedaer sees an opportunity. Why wait until summer of 1781 is agreed? Attack now, while everyone is confused, and the Crusaders leaderless and in chaos. So a month after Loeck gets the news, he receives a coded message from Raedaer, Nod Fae Alay. It's the agreed upon go signal to execute their invasion plans, but it's 6 months early. The Arnyarans have already used the preceding month to maneuver their massive land train formations into position. Loeck has to scramble. He accelerates the entire Crusade timetable, rushing the Iscavite forces to invade eastern Creven. The plan was always risky, using fast, mechanized warfare to take the Crevish coast and link Iski to Mirabreach by sea, creating the crucial Loeck-Mauvn shipping quarter. But now they're doing it half prepared, ahead of schedule, because Raedaer jumped the gun. It's the first betrayal, remember it. And as an aside, something not written in my notes here, if you've read or listened to, because there's a number of good videos on the Alakinder origin story, you know that one of the things he did is he revolutionized warfare on the continent by creating air mobile forces. He grew up in an airship family and realized that instead of encircling towns and laying siege and long drawn-out conflicts, he could use air power to step over the enemy lines and disrupt their supply lines and pin them in place to be attacked from the front, to end battles quickly and decisively. And he did this across the whole continent. And so he revolutionized warfare to some extent. To a great extent, I guess, because it worked. And now we have Loeck and his Iscavite allies who are trying also something new. Traditionally, tractors are slower, lumbering beasts, more support than frontline assault. And working with the Iscavites, they're trying something new, which is fast tractors carrying troops, bypassing small forces, attacking strong points, surrounding, investing. And it works. It works really well until the Fidwag show up. And that's because the Iscavites of Alakinder tried to revolutionize warfare, and here is Loeck also trying to revolutionize warfare. Whether he knows that he's emulating Alakinder or not, I'm not so sure, but he is. Among the Iscavite goals was taking the coast of Creven to link the two Crusader states and to solidify supply lines. The promised Arnyaran invasion of Campryg in early 1781 took the Campryans as completely by surprise as the Crevish had been. Campryg was now committed on two fronts, with their Gwent allies against Tolmor in eastern Campryg, and now with western Campryg under attack by the Arnyarans, the wall was vulnerable. The Iscavite campaign met with great early successes and in many aspects was proceeding ahead of schedule until the FOD surprise landings fortifying the mouth of the Eretini River. With communications cut off from Crusader HQ in Talk, no intelligence had made it to the Campryg's network, even hinting at an incoming Fidwag intervention. At first it works. Iscavite mechanized invasion is a success. Fast armored columns rolling through eastern Creven, achieving objectives ahead of schedule. Loeck's gamble on this new style of warfare is paying off, until the Fidwag Overseas Department lands at the Eretini River Delta. Nobody saw this coming, not Crusader intelligence, they're too busy, not Loeck's spy network, they're confined to the west, nobody. The FOD fortifies the river mouth, and suddenly the entire excavated advance is stalled. This is catastrophic for Loeck's strategy. His entire plan relied on taking the coast, on linking Iski and Meerbreach by controlling the Lake Morande shoreline. Without it, his supply lines are strangled. The Union of Free Nations can't survive economically if its two major industrial centers can't trade with each other. The Iski attack is stalled. Meerbreach's preparations for the Koftir offensive are stalled because those resources are now needed to deal with the FOD. Everything is falling apart. The Iski attack was stalled. Meerbreach's preparations for an attack in the Koftir were stalled, and Raedaer, for a second time, had violated his pact with Loeck. In the spring of 1781, the Foscaldae went beyond the agreed-upon limits of their invasion and attacked further east into Creven, beyond the ancestral land of Aber, and gobbled up more Crevish land. And then, in spring 1781, Raedaer violates the pact a second time. He was supposed to stop at Aber's original borders. That was the deal. Reclaim your ancestral homeland, but leave the rest of Creven alone. Leave in Vevenverda in the northern counties to Maven. Instead, he keeps pushing east. The Foscaldae gobble up more Crevish territory, advancing towards Vevenverda itself. Second betrayal. Now Loeck is in an impossible position. His Iskavite forces are stalled by the FOD. His Arnyaran ally is out of control, threatening the capital of Creven and about to drag Loeck into conflict with Maven, the one person who could legitimize his union politically. And he's already committed massive resources to the planned Koftir offensive that he can't pull back without looking weak. He's overextended on three fronts simultaneously. The Union of Free Nations is on the verge of collapse. Loeck's plan for a Union of Free Nations was in peril. Too many resources had already been spent to position the Crusader military to attack Koftir. But those forces were needed far to the northeast to help break the FOD landings. The Crevish Gwildifin was rapidly losing ground to the Western Arnyarans, and in Vevenverda might yet be in danger. Desperate, Loeck turned to unlikely allies in late 1781. So the biography ends here, with Loeck desperate and turning to Maven. But we actually know what happened next, thanks to documents discovered decades later in Maven's private papers in 1823, and Loeck's archives, donated to the Military Institute of Akon in 1834. They met in secret in the fall of 1781, an abandoned Crusader observation post along the Meerbreachy-Crevish border. Both arrived with minimal security, understanding that if this meeting became public, it would be politically catastrophic for both of them. And here's what's remarkable. This isn't a reunion of former lovers. Whatever they had, romantic or not, is gone. Burned away by years of war and political necessity. According to witness accounts from the security personnel present, their conversation was clinical, professional. Two former lovers reduced to strategic necessity. Maven opens by pointing out that Raedaer, Loeck's ally, has decided her capital would make a nice addition to his free state. She's essentially saying, your revolutionary friend is threatening to destroy everything I have left. Loeck admits Raedaer is a problem he helped create, but he can't move to contain Aber while his forces are pinned down by the FOD, her Fidwag allies, and scattered across three fronts. They negotiate like chess players. Maven offers combined Crusader-Crevish military operations to push Arnyaran forces back to Aber's original borders. And crucially, she'll use her influence to pressure the FOD to limit their operations to defensive positions around the Eretini Delta, and coordinate with her army of Vevenverda instead of the southern Crevish rivals who undermine her authority. This would finally let Loeck complete his Lake Morande shipping corridor. Loeck offers military support against the Arnyarans, plus diplomatic coordination, whatever is needed. But here's the price. Maven demands recognition of expanded Crevish sovereignty over the northern Eldmore Valley, legitimizing her rule over traditionally autonomous regions. She also wants Loeck to recognize her government and potentially negotiate a trade deal. And Loeck agrees to all of it, but he insists on one thing. Aber must survive as an independent state, within its original borders. He can't destroy the principle of self-determination just because one leader abused it. He needs that principle to survive for his union to mean anything. So think about what they're agreeing to here. Publicly, this will look like coordination against Arnyaran expansion. two enemies setting aside differences to deal with a mutual threat. Privately, they're partitioning Creven into spheres of influence. Loeck gets Iscavite control of the southern Crevish coast around Halfjord. Maven gets expanded sovereignty in the north. They're covering up a nation between them. And most damning of all, they're going to join forces to contain Aber. Aber, which represents the most successful implementation of Crusader democratic ideals on the continent. Aber, which is doing exactly what Loeck's Union of Free Nations is supposed to enable, common Quar governing themselves, free from First Family control. Loeck, the revolutionary who wanted to end the First Family's power and let common Quar rule themselves, is now allied with the First Family ruler to crush another revolutionary movement because that movement got out of his control. Maven, who fought against Crusader occupation and lost her kingdom to them, is now coordinating military operations with her former occupier. It's the ultimate betrayal of everything both of them claim to believe in, but it might be the only thing that saves both of their nations from complete collapse. And the personal dimension makes it worse. In private papers released decades later, there's a fragment from Maven. You always were better at grand strategy than reading Quar, Galo. Using his first name, intimate but not affectionate, more like disappointment. And Loeck's only recorded personal comment comes at the end of the meeting. I hope this works better than our last partnership. That's it. That's all that's left of whatever they had. A Dinah who maybe loved him once, now using his first name like a weapon. A Buck who maybe loved her, acknowledging their previous failure. Two Quar who might have genuinely cared for each other in 1775 or 6, back when things seemed possible, now bound together only by mutual desperation and the cold recognition that sometimes survival requires betraying your deepest beliefs. The idealists who volunteered for the 72nd Craich Line Regiment in the early days of the Crusade would be horrified by Campryg Loeck in 1781. The young dowager who wanted to hold her nation together with dignity would be ashamed of what she's agreeing to. But here's the really tragic part. This betrayal, this alliance built on cynicism, necessity, and the corpse of whatever they once felt for each other, might be the only thing that prevents the complete collapse of the entire Western theater. Their noble ideas couldn't save them. Their revolutionary principles couldn't save them. Their love, if that's what it was, couldn't save them. Only compromise and the willingness to betray everything they believed in might save them. And that's the story of Campryg Loeck, a war hero who became a revolutionary, who became a political leader, who became a pragmatist, a betrayer of his own cause, or just another Quar ground down by the long war until there's nothing left but survival. The answer probably depends on whether the Loeck-Mauvn Accord works, and in late 1781, none of us know if it will. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my lore talk. Next time I'll do this in podcast voice. See ya.